Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, it's good to see all of those that are joining us in Zoom. It's beautiful to see your faces. And Zach, may I ask you to, in one more moment, to put the file I send you, but not yet. Yesterday we spoke about Parashat Shmini, and there are two big topics in Parashat Shmini. One, maybe three. One is the beginning of the work of the Kohanim. The priests, they were consecrating the tabernacle. The tabernacle was built, then for 7 days were focused on consecrating the tabernacle, and on the 8th day, they come out, and they are finally engaged in doing the work of serving the Mishkan, the tabernacle. There's some role modeling that comes from Aaron, Kohen HaGadol, and Moshe. They are brothers, they are siblings. And it goes very well. There's a description of a beautiful ceremony. Nadav and Abihu, they were observing them as well, and they imitate, you could say, what their dad and uncle were doing. And that doesn't go that well. And we spoke about the different interpretations around why it didn't go well. And that our commentators pretty much divide in two groups. Those that say that they were driven by wrong motivations, and those that say that they elevated themselves to such a high level that they reach an extension, a place in which the human body couldn't survive. And we spoke about that in the context of mystical thinking. And there is something that I didn't mention yesterday intentionally, because I thought it was going too far. But there is in the Mishnah, and later on in the Talmud, a very famous story, the story of the four that enter the Pardes, that somehow speaks about this same situation of entering a place that you are not, that while you have the ability to enter that place, you don't have the ability to survive in that place. And the only one who has the ability to survive in that place and to come out the same way he came in is Rabbi Akiva. And what we learn about Rabbi Akiva from the four that entered the Pardes, there were four rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, Ben Soma, Ben Asai, and Elisha ben Abuya. Four rabbis. And to each of them happen different things. One gets hurt, the other one dies, the other one kind of Kotetz Manetivot is written. It's like he lives a Jewish tradition and becomes something else. That's why later on he's called Acher, the different one. And only about Rabbi Akiva, we read that Unichnas LeShalom, toward peace, and came out in peace. So the thing that we learn about Rabbi Akiva is that he was the only one with the right level of preparation. All this to say that immediately after that, the Torah starts speaking about limitations, boundaries. And when we think about boundaries in the context of Jewish tradition, one of the main topics is kashrut. The topic that comes immediately after this situation is kashrut. And I don't think that the reason for kashrut being after the situation is, as many commentators say, well, a mere coincidence. Like, no way. No way. I think that there's a very interesting sequence, and I want to point that out to you, and then we'll go into reading some stuff about kashrut, we will study together a little bit. Commentators point out to the fact there are always different commentaries in our tradition. This is a less popular path, but it's right there, and I think it's an important one. They point out to the fact that those that got terribly hurt are the children of the most important leader, of the Kohen HaGadol. And what Torah might be trying to say is that we're all humans, and if we don't understand and we don't acknowledge our limitations and our need to learn, and it doesn't matter who is your father or your mother, we all can get hurt. Even great leaders should be limited or need to be limited in their power or in the use of their power. Now, Daphne, going back to our conversation a couple of years ago when you were working on this in this pasuk from Bereshit. You remember we were younger. I barely recall it, but I do remember. A part of our conversation was about the responsibility that human beings have over managing the earth. And if we use excessive power when we are managing this earth, we might create a situation in which this earth is not a place in which we can live. And I think these two things come together so wonderfully in this Torah portion. Not only the height above, but also what happens in earth. And then we go to a terrenal conversation about kosher eating. So from that place to kosher eating. So Zaki, can you put the file I sent you? I take that as a yes. No, they left. Zach, are you there? Milo, can you? Oh, Zach is not there? I need you to put the file that I sent you this morning to the streaming email. Are you working on that? I can't hear you, Milo. Excuse me? Kosher one, yes. The one that says Shmini kosher. The only one I sent you this week. We are almost there. But you want to put that in the thing. So let me start by reading you. Listen to me while Milo is working on that. You listen to me, and I will read slowly. Okay, we'll start as slowly. Zach is there. Okay, Vayikra 11, 44, 47, all the kosher laws. Okay, Zaki, can you take care of that? Thank you. Look at me, everybody. Look at me. Forget the screen for a couple of minutes. So the 11 chapter of the book of Leviticus starts with all the kosher rules. If you also are looking at the screen that doesn't have the stuff and also making noise at the same time, it becomes almost an impossible task for me. So please help me out. Be with me. I have also a bunch of people connecting in Zoom that they deserve my attention. I can't divide in three. Please help me. We all need to acknowledge our limitations. More than three I cannot do at the same time. My wife would say that no more than one. Is that correct? Depends on the day. Okay, so, for I am holy, for I am Adonai your God. Make yourselves holy, and be holy, for I am holy. And do not defile yourself with any manner of swarming thing that moves upon the earth, for I am the eternal that brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the beast and the fowl and of every living creature that moves in the waters. and of every creature that swarms on the earth, to make, and this is the most important part, to make a division between the tameh, the impure, and the ta'or, the pure, and between the living thing that might be eaten, and the living thing that might not be eaten. Now, when the Torah is summarizing the 11th chapter of the book of Leviticus, I think it gives us the most important idea. It's about making a distinction between the ta'or and the tameh, between the pure and the impure. And now, you have the text? Not yet. Okay. Once you have the text, I will invite you to read with me. Rashi says, "For I am the eternal your God, just as I am holy, for I am the eternal your God. So too, you must make yourselves holy." And the word there is below, down there. So we were speaking about up there with Nadav and Abihu, and summarizes down there, you got to find a way for holiness without trying to elevate yourself to heaven, here in earth, when you interact with nature, when you interact with fellow human beings. Oh, that's fantastic news. Thank you, Milo and Zach. Okay, so I need to go all the way to Moreh Nebuchim. Now, I need to tell you something. Yeah, to the English of Moreh Nebuchim. So I need to tell you something. Rambam is one of my favorite thinkers for two reasons. Sometimes because I completely agree with him, and sometimes because I think that he's totally wrong. You tell me in a moment which one I think is this one. Can you read, Mitch? Guy for the perplex?
I maintain that the food which is forbidden by the law is unwholesome. There is nothing among the forbidden kinds of food.
Mitch? Well, we are almost done. We are starting a very slow Shabbat today, and we need a bit
Here
more
we go.
timing.
Woo. Okay.
And take this one, make sure it's working. Come on. Okay, good. Yalla.
I maintain that the food which is forbidden by the law is unwholesome. There's nothing among the forbidden kinds of food whose injurious characters is doubted except pork and fat, but also in these cases the doubt is not justified, for pork contains more moisture than necessary for human food and too much a superfluous matter. The principal reason why the law forbids swine's flesh is to be found in the circumstance that its habits and its food are very dirty and loathsome. It has already been pointed out how emphatically the law enjoins the removal of the sight of loathsome objects, even in the field and in the camp. How much more objectionable is such a sight in towns? But if it were allowed to eat swine's flesh, the streets and houses would be more dirty than any cesspool, as may be seen at present in the country of the Franks. A saying of our sages declares, "The mouth of a swine is as dirty as dung itself."
Okay, he's trying to make a point here, right? That microphone might be a bit too high, Zaki. Okay, what's the Rambam trying to say? And if you want to share, we have a microphone, and I would like to ask you to unmute people in Zoom so they can participate, but also to have the ability to mute them because not necessarily they hear us, and so if we want to continue with the conversation, we want to have control over that. So what's the Rambam talking about? What?
Health.
Health.
It's a dirty food animal.
Yeah, so he's going into a very classic argument. He's saying, well, very simply, we are giving these kosher laws because otherwise we would be very unhealthy. He's a doctor. He's an MD besides being a rabbi. And he's trying to play an argument that seems to be very concrete and rational. There is a problem with that argument. What's the problem with that argument? Is that it's simply not true. Like, it's just wrong. Because we know that, at the contemporary, bit later, to Ramban, Nachmanides will say, people are eating, other things and things that we define as no kosher, and they're not dying. So how are you going to deal with that? And yes, every a few months, someone shows up and says, well, there is a proof now, a scientific proof that if you mix dairy and meat, you die earlier, whatever. That's not the reason for us to eat kosher. The rabbis in the Talmud have a very interesting conversation. I didn't bring it here. That one of the rabbis says, well, eating pork is horrible. And the other rabbi says, how do you know? And then, I don't know, says the other rabbi. They go back and forth. And then the second rabbi says, I know, I have been close to where other peoples are, and I have smelled pork, and it smells terrific. Doesn't smell that bad, he says. So, but we don't refrain from eating pork because it's horrible. We refrain from eating pork because we eat kosher. So the question, if pork is not horrible and kosher is not necessarily healthier, it could be, and there are all kinds of ideas, and people think that there are certain practices that are more clean or were cleaner than the practices that existed at the time. What's the reason to actually keep kosher? And let's make a clear distinction that, one more second, that for a very long time, liberal Jews said, or many liberal Jews said, well, we don't have to follow kosher laws. And I also want to say, I think they got them wrong. I think that they got it completely wrong. But I also think that the Ramban got it wrong. So what can be right about kosher? Let's keep going down. And by the way, let's see what the clear card says. Who wants to read? Well, you have a microphone already. If you want to be a reader, just point out with your hand and I will bring you a microphone. Go.
The reason for the laws of kashrut is not for physical health benefits, as the Rambam explains. We see that non-Jews eat non-kosher foods and are healthy. Rather, their purpose is for well-being of the soul. Non-kosher foods remove the spirit of purity and holiness and create a blockage in the intelligence and cause cruelty. This only helps them, Israel, for they will live in the world to come. But for non-Jews, there's no purpose in this mitzvot. Oh.
I was about to erase that last sentence. I was saying, no, let's deal with the entire thing. Let's deal with that. So the clear card, 16th century Amsterdam and Poland. The clear card says, well, it's not really about health. And he brings a very important argument. He says, when you don't eat kosher, when you don't have let's put aside the word kosher for one moment. When you don't have some mindfulness attached to your daily habits, then you lose awareness of how you interact with the environment. That's the mental blockage he's speaking about. Now, if you have no awareness, according to his idea, then he said, well, you're not going to get it to the world to come, and you are only going to make it to the world to come, once again, according to his idea, if you're a Jew, so that's why only the Jews will need to be preoccupied with that. So, setting that aside, let's just make this clear. He's not a liberal or a universalist. Clearly, he's not. He's making a very clear distinction between Jews and non-Jews there. He's not a universalist, but he's saying, no, there's something in the action of eating kosher, of having some modality that puts your mind into something. Now, I want to read, this is a bit long, but I really want to read this open letter. There's a book written by by David Hartman, The Rooms of the Heart, in which he addresses different, a heart with many rooms is called, a heart of many rooms, in which he addresses different sramim, different streams in Jewish tradition, and he speaks to the different Jewish identities about different topics and speak about important thinkers. This is the open letter to the Reformed rabbi. Who wants to be our reader? You go? Okay.
Framing of the conversation, part 2. Jesus of Nazareth is reported to have said, "It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is rather what comes out of the mouth." We talked about that last week, actually.
Uh-huh.
In referring to what goes into the mouth, he was speaking not of the dietary laws of the Bible, but rather the Pharisaic requirement to wash the hands before eating. There's no reason to doubt that Jesus observed the biblical food restrictions, and there's no reason to think that he called for their abrogation. But the new church soon had more Gentiles than Jewish adherents, and it rapidly adjusted to the situation. The Apostle Peter was said to have been shown in a vision that the impure animals were no longer forbidden. At a historic gathering, it was decided that Gentile converts to Christianity need refrain only from the meat of idolatrous sacrifices, from blood, and from animals that had been strangled. In later centuries, Christian critics of Judaism vehemently attacked the dietary laws, with the result that Jewish resistance stiffened. Many Christians resented the unwillingness of Jews to eat in Christian...
We need to go down, guys. So just let me frame something about this argument that Hartman is making. He's talking about the beginning of Christianity and how the new church thought about kashrut, kosher eating, and then he's bringing it to the context of Reform Judaism. Why? Reform Judaism or progressive Judaism as a movement is born in Europe in conversation with Christianity. And Jews were many times, as we know, during the Middle Age, the medieval times, in very complicated situations with fellow human beings that happen to be Christians. And now he's framing that to say, well, obviously, because of this kind of conversation, Reformed Judaism was thinking, when it was born, about how to blend into society and how to be less noticed. And then
the desire to break down such barriers was one of the considerations that led to the founders of Reform movement to rethink the question of dietary observance. The issue was raised in Reformed Jewish circles in the 1840s, if not earlier, and was under discussion for some decades. In 1885, a group of distinguished Reform rabbis adopted the famous Pittsburgh Platform. It contained the statement, "We hold that such Mosaic and rabbinic laws as regulate diet, priestly purity, and dress originated in ages under the influence of ideas entirely foreign to our present mental and spiritual state. They fail to impress the modern Jew with the spirit of priestly holiness. Their observance in our days is apt to obstruct rather than further to modern spiritual elevation." However, Isaac M. Wise, the chief organizer of the movement in America, and publicly advocated the retention of these laws for hygienic reasons and urged that they not be made subject of controversy and bitterness.
Let me stop you for 1 second. Now, what Hartman is saying is that, and which is true, that Pittsburgh Platform says, well, we don't really feel that there is a need for this, and that Wise, the founder of the Reform movement, I need not help me out 1 second. Let's have one conversation. So, and Isaac Wise, he says, well, we actually need to keep kosher, but the reasoning that he uses is actually a Rambamic one. It's hygiene. He says it's healthier. Is the reason that you would think that actually a liberal Jew, from a scientific perspective, would say today, well, that's questionable. Not sure. It's a bit problematic to hold to that onto that position. Can we go down? More than. Low. We're going to skip this. Skip. Okay. Now, this brings another question. So if kosher eating is about finding purity versus impurity, it's about finding holiness. And there is an argument that says that that holiness has to do with taking care of our bodies and has nothing to do with the soul. That could be a track. Then kosher eating not necessarily is so relevant. Because you say, well, not necessarily healthier, not necessarily better. It's a mitzvah, so I don't ask, I just fulfill mitzvah. The question is there really a meaning to kosher eating beyond hygiene or beyond health? I think there is. And I want to share, this is attributed to Rabbi Salman. I actually must admit that I found this in several places in internet, but in my books, or the books I have from Rabbi Salman, I couldn't find this. But I know that he's the creator of the idea of eco-kashrut. And it appears in many places, so hopefully this is absolutely right. But I just want to acknowledge that this is a non-check source by me. Okay. Who has a microphone? If you have a microphone, just
I've got a microphone.
Go.
I invented the word eco-kosher to say that something is ecologically kosher. I give you an example of eco-kosher. The regular kosher way is about the dishes that mustn't be contaminated, etc. If I pick up a cup to have coffee, styrofoam would be the best thing to have. It hasn't been used before, and after I drink from it, I'll throw it away, and nobody else will use it. From the usual kosher place, that's the direction to go. But in comparison to that, what will happen to the planet by my drinking into styrofoam, I'd much rather make the other choice, eco-kosher.
So he says there's another layer. Kashrut, keeping kosher, is about developing that awareness that the Kli Yashar was speaking about to take care of the earth. It's not a unique truth. It's not that that's the only way to take care of the earth. That's the Jewish one. But if the ultimate idea is to take care of the earth, well, I need to be thinking about other layers of kosher. Can you go down? This is from an expert from an interview that was done to Rabbi Greenberg. Now, an interesting thing is that we know that Heschel made the same determination, but he was a conservative Jew. This is an Orthodox Jew, a modern Orthodox. So it makes a big difference from that perspective. Who's going? Go.
In 1971, you were the only Orthodox rabbis to declare that non-union lettuce and grapes should be regarded as non-kosher, and you urged Jews to boycott them. What is the basis in Judaism for that position? Greenberg. We were both students of the
Let me stop you 1 second. He says, no, it's not me. He goes to the biggest Rebbe of Orthodox Judaism in the United States and says, that's not me. I'm a student of my Rebbe. So he's given that like a higher legitimacy. When rabbis go back to a previous rabbi, to their teacher, and say, no, I'm just following the Torah of my teacher, saying that's what we are supposed to do. And this legitimacy is even bigger than my own person. It's the legitimacy of generations of interpretation. Keep going.
Rabbi Joseph Socolovsky. From him, we learned the idea that halakha is not just a list of ritual do's and don'ts, but a comprehensive worldview that applies to everything that happens around us. The Torah prohibits the exploitation of workers. So why shouldn't that apply to migrant farm workers picking lettuce or grapes? They were being mistreated, so it was natural for us to apply the principle of non-exploitation to their situation too. It seems obvious.
Thank you. Any comment on this? So he's adding.
What is forbidden foods? at all. It adds to it from a, whether you call it eco or behavioral perspective of respecting those that are being exploited, but I don't think it gives a proper explanation of why we have forbidden foods.
He's talking about why the grapes and the tomatoes, or the lettuce, sorry, the grapes and the tomatoes became later on forbidden. He's saying, talking about,
Distinguish between kosher and non-kosher grapes primarily because of the environment in which they were produced.
well, he's saying that ethical kashrut is a real thing, and that the foundation for eating kosher is to develop an ethical vision of how to live our lives in the world. Yes, but have a microphone. You need to have a microphone, otherwise we are excluding the people in Zoom. And Zach, are you allowing people in Zoom to make comments? Or if anyone in Zoom that you want to jump in, just let us know, raise your hand and speak.
So I heard the different explanation for,
Go.
and I said it in Torah study, and I think it might be interesting. It actually comes from Chabad, and then looking at the whole thing is what God wants from us. And he compares the relationship between God and us as a wife and husband. And for instance, you sit with your wife and you're watching TV, and your wife wants coffee, and she wants it in a very, very white, like with a lot of milk, and you telling her, well, but that doesn't make sense, it's just not coffee anymore. You put all these things in, but that's how she wants it. So you, as a person that really wants to satisfy her, you just do it the way she wants. You don't ask her why you want it with more milk. I think it's not good, so much milk. It's not eco, it's not this, it's not this. You want it this way, I give it to you this way. So they separating between, in the different laws of kashrut, they have 3 levels, and some of it is, they're just not explanation. That's how God wants it from
Well,
us.
that's the difference
That's
between
how
Chukim
we
and
want it.
Mishpatim.
And so there's just different ways to look at it.
So we are probably, sure, there are things that, so correct, like there are things that you say, well, why this one and not the other one? Yes, we have formula from the Torah. But the point is that we don't stay in the formula. Jewish tradition never stays in the formula. As a matter of fact, we are a Talmudic tradition. Like we are a product of constant conversation, so it's Chabad. And I'll show you something from Chabad in a moment. Just to, or from one of the Hasidic masters, just to turn it once again. The idea of accepting laws the way they are, it works to some extent. But the question is there for the liberal Jew a real purpose on keeping kashrut, on having the idea of kashrut as a central value in Jewish tradition? And what I'm suggesting is that Jewish tradition, the idea of kosher eating, is not to fulfill a divine caprice. The idea of kosher eating is to fulfill the idea of taking care of the earth and taking care of the rest of humanity, not only of animals. And so let's see what Cardoso says. I need a fast reader.
There is little doubt that one of the functions of the kashrut laws is to protect the animal from pain even during the slaughtering. Still, we cannot deny that in our own slaughterhouses where proper shechita, thank you, is done, there have been serious violations of another law, Sa'at Ba'al.
Tsar Balei Chai, which is inflicting pain. We're going to cut it a little bit, Mark. I'm just losing an hour. So Cardoso will speak about inflicting pain in animals. So when you have the industry of meat, and you are trying to be very productive in your industrial work, and the most important thing behind your work is your profit, and in that work you forget to take care of the animals, you just, in a unmindful way, fulfill the laws of kosher shechita, he will say it's not enough. It's not enough, and I will play the argument that you will say that some of the kosher corporations in the United States are adopting now the laws of humanely raised meat. So you will start seeing in kosher levels, go to Trader Joe's. You will see that Empire, for example, has added that it's not only kosher, also humanely raised. Because real kashrut, will say Cardoso, was created in a context in which there was some relationship between the consumer and the animal. That relationship doesn't exist anymore, and what you get is a steak. And you don't care, not saying that you don't care, but our society doesn't think much about how that steak made its way to the groceries. I'm not advocating for everybody to become vegetarian, but I think that kashrut advocates, and some people will say that kashrut advocates ultimately for vegetarian eating, but I think that kashrut advocates for mindfulness. Advocates for saying, no, it's not only about the shechita, it's also about the life of this animal. What was the life of this chicken? What was the life of this cow? And what Cardoso, who is an Orthodox Jew, is bringing us a very strong criticism, is saying, our kosher corporations are not doing that work. They're not really kosher anymore. And you will see that there is a movement among Orthodox Jews that they began to be vegetarian because they don't trust the corporations. This Jew, for example, I buy, my gold standard is kosher and humanely raised. But then, second one is not kosher, it's humanly raised. Third one is kosher. But by that time, I already eaten vegetarian. This is my personal choice. What we're trying to say is that for the liberal Jew, kashrut is not a value in a world that has disconnected itself from where our natural resources are coming. Kashrut is not a value to disregard. Kashrut is a value to reclaim because we want to have a relationship with nature. You can have any interpretation of kashrut. From that perspective, I'm a Reform rabbi. I have my interpretation. I invite you to develop yours. But to disconnect ourselves from our plates, that's a terrible mistake. That's to disregard such a crucial Jewish value. And I want to give you, I see you, Elaine, give me one more text, and then we have more conversation. Kedushas Levi on Parashat Noach. Now, why Parashat Noach? Because Parashat Noach tells us that after the flood, we started to eat meat. So the argument is that before that, we were vegetarian. But Kedushas Levi is the Berdichev rabbi, okay? Like Chabadnik, 100%. Okay? Let's see what he says. The verse which states, take for yourself from all that is edible, is say in the language that implies one who feeds others. This is explained in the Midrash which states, the woman that was given to me gave me fruit from the tree and I ate. The past tense I ate was not used in the verse. The Midrash teaches a general rule that through eating, a Jew eats in the manner of fixing the flow of the first human being that was made through eating. This fixing is done by way of the mitzvot that Jews do when eating, which are blessings said of one's food, and other blessings said in regards to food before conception. Therefore, the reason why the verse says, I eat and not I ate, implies that an element of Adam's original eating continues to this day. Thus, through the consciousness of our eating, we can repair that which was flawed before. What? No, it's saying, no, they're together. No, they're together. There's the law and the reason for the law. Saying that the law, of course, there's a structure, there's a very specific and arbitrary way to that. But also Chabad will say it's not enough for us. We need to bring deeper meaning to this. And here's the Berdichev saying, no. When I commit myself, because eating kosher is not necessarily easy. Ask my children when we travel to places and I have them eating for 2 weeks vegetarian and they are carnivores. I say, well, there's no humanly raised or kosher here. And we eat vegetarian. Ask them. They feel it's a total sacrifice. It's not, we don't eat kosher only because that it's a rule. We're seeking for a connection, for a relationship with the world we live in. And Elaine, you want to say something, and then I want to read last text before
I do want to say
all those that are here kill me for running too long.
Is it working? Is it working? Working?
Yes, it's working.
Okay. It seems to me that I was understood that the highest level of kashrut is vegetarianism.
That's an argument that comes from Rabbi Cook.
Rabbi Cook. Okay. And then when we became more hunter-oriented, then we moved into eating the meat.
Yes.
And then when you talked about the restrictions that were put upon us, not just from kashrut, but many other things, to put limits on what we could and couldn't do. So the killing, we therefore had to kill the animal. We killed the animal, but there were certain restrictions about how that animal was to be killed and how it was to be prepared so that we could then eat it properly. Now, I have eaten at many homes that are kosher, and believe me, there is no connection between the values that you're talking about and their eating kashrut.
Correct.
There's a disconnect completely.
I understand.
Okay. I think it's just according, and some homes it's like some of my wonderful grandchildren, they don't just eat kashrut, it's kashrut according to this
To
rabbi.
this specific right. Can you want to give me a bottom line? Because I really want to be mindful and conclude, so give it to me.
Okay. For me personally,
Yes.
I have a sense that by observing kashrut, there is an awareness on my part that I do have a connection to me being Jewish. I am aware that when I eat a kosher meal in my home, that there is an awareness that I can't have somebody come and do potluck. That is a sacrifice. But that's my stand. When I go out, if it's meat, then I just eat vegetarian. It is a sacrifice, but that's a sacrifice that connects me to my identity as a Jew. And again, it's not that I'm connected to how I'm thinking the animal is being killed.
So
That's me.
let me piggyback in what you just said. Connection to my identity as a Jew, being a Yehudi, a Jew, is to be grateful. Yehudi comes from the word Odaya. Grateful for what? For the word that you were gifted. So there are rules, there are behaviors that help us express and exercise that gratitude and recognize that gratitude in our work. Daphna, I want to get back to you and something that you say, and I think you understand what I was referring to. What Elaine was saying, that what is this connection between meaning and action, is the Torah of Ishayahu Leibovich, who says, no, we are commanded to do things. This is what we are supposed to do. And doing those things is meaningful by itself. That's a vision that exists in Judaism, and it's a very important one. I think that within that vision, there's like an internal argument also that says it's not enough. And I think that's why I was saying about Chabad. I'm saying that there's this idea that Chabad, you will find it, that say, these are the rules, we follow it the way it is, and we don't question the formula. But there is an argument that says we we need meaning to this mitzvot. We need like a deeper meaning, because otherwise I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I struggle with that. So I want to conclude with one idea that comes from Rabbi Sheila Peltz, Weinberg. Eating is the primary way that human beings interact with the rest of nature. We are composed of the same elements and compounds that make up our food. Indeed, when we eat, we transform a part of nature into energy that we can use for conscious purposes. The system of kashrut causes us to pause and consider that while we are part of nature, Daphne, going back to our conversation, we are endowed with a unique potential to make choices in the way we respond to life. And here's the bottom line.
Rabbi,
The
I
bottom line is not.
I
Caroline?
would love to add to what the previous speaker just said. Eating dietary laws from different religious groups is a gut reaction. It's things that you were brought up with and what you were willing to give up if you decide not to follow completely, and what you decide to follow. And some of it doesn't make any sense at all. I had a wonderful conversation with a Hindu, a Muslim, and myself of what we would do at home, what we would do outside, and what we just don't do. I cannot eat meat and dairy together. I can have something in between in the same meal, but to eat meat and dairy together, and I would take the cheese off a hamburger and bite into the bun before I took the meat. I just couldn't do it together.
Caroline, can you hear me?
There was also
I need you to help me.
a
I need
historic
to make a
distortion in what you just said, and I have to correct it. The United Farm Workers of America were running the boycott of lettuce and grapes. It
What?
wasn't union picking or non-union picking. They were the union pickers. It was basically out of California. New York State already banned the chemical I'm going to talk about. There was a chemical that in California they were still
Zach,
using.
Zach, help me,
that
he
killed
cannot hear me. Caroline, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I love to hear the input, the historical
They
point,
were operating
but
out
I
of
was,
my
I
office.
was,
I know what was going on.
so I love to hear that, and if it's wrong, I'd love to be
And
corrected.
it was a health thing. It was a health thing because that chemical was creating birth defects and killing workers. And New York State had banned that chemical, but California had not. And there was a passing the fast to demonstrate how important it is what you eat. And it was based on
Caroline, I don't think you hear me. I can't. We barely can hear you, and I don't want to cut you. But I just said the bottom line, and then you started with this comment. So I'd love to hear your comment after the service. I will stay here, and you can share your comment with me. I'd love to hear that. But I want to get back to the bottom line because we are really running late, and I was finishing the conversation. The point that I want to leave all of you with is that kosher eating is not only kosher eating. It's a mindset that we try to bring to ourselves as we interact with the world, with nature, and with fellow human beings. And that is not a value to disregard and to say, well, that's not how I exercise my Jewish identity, because a part of exercising our Jewish identity is being very mindful of how we want to interact with the world. The interaction that we have with the world in our tradition is called kashrut. Shabbat shalom.